All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. That is the first example given in the Wikipedia article about metaphors, and if you think starting my video about metaphors this way is just me being lazy, well, you're probably right, but if you keep watching to the end, it might just make a little bit of sense. I think there's a certain irony to this metaphor. I'm actually not at all sure what the word irony means anymore, but my point is that isn't a stage sort of supposed to be an abstract representation of the world? Saying all the world's a stage is like saying a ship at sea is a toy boat in a bathtub. Well, okay, maybe Shakespeare's metaphor was a bit better. But what makes a good metaphor? Well, surely it has something to do with our innate, uniquely human ability to process and appreciate the subtleties of language, but let's instead pose the question to a cold, unfeeling AI because it's impossible to get through a YouTube video these days without doing that. A good metaphor is one that is both evocative and illuminating. Nice. I'm going to stop it there though because I don't want to give over too much creative control to my new best friend and soon to be all-powerful overlord. And yes, I realize that AI enslaving humanity is one of the most cliche jokes there is, so I'm putting this line into the script in case I forget to go back and rewrite it with something more clever. While many metaphors may appear to be simply rhetorical flourishes or little elegant pieces of poetry, at its core, metaphor is an integral part of our language, and some have even argued an integral part of the way we perceive the world. In the pioneering and influential book Metaphors We Live By, George Lakoff and Mark Johnson explore the idea of conceptual metaphors. A conceptual metaphor is essentially just understanding one idea in terms of another. A common example is the idea that love is a journey, which is evident in phrases like, "Look how far we've come," "We're at a crossroads," "Our relationship is a dead end." Another example is the idea that time is money. We talk about how we spend our time, or say that somebody is living on borrowed time, and we debate whether or not it's worth investing time into something. And although it may seem obvious that time is in many ways very different from money, in our current society, time and money are very closely linked. We are often paid by the hour and keenly aware of the limited amount of time we have to devote to various activities and obligations. So you could ask, is it because of how our society is structured that we feel it so convenient to refer to time as money, or is it in part because that metaphor has become so ingrained in our language that we find ourselves stuck conceiving of time this way even when another metaphor may be more appropriate in certain situations? Other common metaphors include the idea that up is good and bad is down. For example, things are looking up, or conversely, I'm at an all-time low. And there are tons of other examples of conceptual mappings that tie our language back to various physical and spatial characteristics. Something significant is big, as in this is about to be the biggest video on YouTube. Just an example, we perceive events in the future as existing in front of us, as in I've got a lot of work ahead of me. And there are a lot of intuitive reasons why we talk about things this way. There's some debate, and I'm going to vastly oversimplify this, as to what extent we actively engage with metaphors as part of a cognitive process, as opposed to simply using them as conventions of language. Clearly, certain metaphors evoke fresh imagery by relating two concepts that we didn't previously associate with each other and allow us to understand something from a new perspective. But other types of metaphors, often called dead metaphors, are very clearly divorced from the original idea that sparked them. For example, and I really didn't want to include this in the video, but so many of the sources I looked at referenced it that it just seemed like the best example. Coming to a head originally refers to a pimple filling with pus. And safe to say, if that was the imagery we saw every time we said a phrase like "the crisis is coming to a head," we definitely wouldn't use it nearly as often. And I'm sorry that I've now permanently ruined that for you. You can just say that something is reaching its boiling point. It means the same thing, it's also a metaphor, and it has a lot better imagery. But the point here is that while language is clearly rooted in metaphor, unless you're a writer or poet or just an especially expressive speaker, you don't tend to go around constantly creating new metaphors just to get your ideas across. For the most part, we use the familiar phrases and systems of metaphor that are conventional to our language. But some have argued that by changing the metaphors we use, we have the potential to change how our society is organized. Indeed, anyone skilled in rhetoric or engaged in political debate knows the power of the words you choose to frame a concept with. There's a big difference between thinking of taxes as a fair redistribution of wealth as opposed to the government stealing your hard-earned wages. But let's put a pin in that for now, which is an interesting figure of speech of which I could not find a definitive origin for, but someone on Urban Dictionary suggested that it means to put a pin back into a grenade so it doesn't explode, and that is a cool metaphor, so let's go with it, even though it's probably wrong. Metonymy is similar to metaphor, but is a figure of speech in which a concept is referred to by something that is very closely related to that thing. For example, calling the executive branch of the United States the White House. Synecdoche is a type of metonymy in which a part of something is used to refer to the whole. For example, calling a car wheels. And Schenectady is a city in New York, but Synecdoche, New York is a movie by Charlie Kaufman in which the character played by Philip Seymour Hoffman, rest in peace, creates a play that is supposed to reflect real life, and in doing so builds a massive replica of New York City within a warehouse with actors playing real people in his life, wherein the lines between this so-called play and reality become increasingly blurred. And if you think this is just a tangent that is wildly spiraling out of control, hold on, because to me this is a beautiful representation of that Shakespeare quote from the beginning. Synecdoche, New York is far from alone in exploring this territory. In The Truman Show, Jim Carrey plays a man whose life is literally a stage and all the people he encounters are actors. More recently, Nathan Fielder's The Rehearsal shows him replicating real-life situations with staging and actors so that people can rehearse various challenges in their lives. And predictably enough, as the show goes on, the lines between rehearsal and reality become increasingly blurred. It goes without saying that works of fiction are often rich with metaphor. In addition to literary metaphors used in prose and dialogue, we often find ourselves searching for larger, overarching metaphors that help expand the meaning of the story. To use an overused example, The Matrix is literally about machines enslaving humanity, don't get any ideas, ChatGPT, but has spawned many metaphorical interpretations such as awakening oneself from ignorance, etc., etc. It is often pointed out that because so much of our modern society revolves around media consumption, it has an outsized influence on what we value, what we strive for, and perhaps even what metaphors feel important to us. Maybe today, all the world's a stage is more true than ever because so much of what we interact with exists on a stage. Maybe the truth is that we are all just that toy boat bobbing away in the bathtub, but we feel like the real ship out on the ocean with the sprays of salt water and violent winds ripping across our faces. We know that we're real, but what if all the ideas we use to construct ourselves are just faint blueprints of something that's never actually been built? What if we are all just metaphors circling each other to find some original source that doesn't exist? But if all this seems like an overblown existential crisis, don't worry, because it's all just yet another metaphor. Just an idea of a way you could think about your life, just a comparison to something else. That's what all metaphors are. Words are just something abstract that, sooner or later, you hope, connect to something real, and you get to decide what you want to be a metaphor for.